Here we go. Hello, everybody. So I'm Aura Cáceres, as I've introduced myself before, and we have a guest. So I'm going to introduce our guest today, and then I'll get started with our presentation. I want to thank everybody who has done the survey. I want to let you know that we review your answers, and we really want to hear from you. Although I was called out just now about, don't tell me that you forgot the wipes again. I got you. Next week, I promise. I promise. That's my commitment. We're a team. I'll take that. But all kidding aside, today's topic is a topic that obviously falls under my wheelhouse. However, I'm going to speak about our processes very briefly because I want to invite you to invite me, get that, to your reflection days so that I can speak to you more specifically about situations that you may be having, about safety within your departments, without your environment, your office. And I think if we do it that way, we can then pave way to today. A few of the reoccurring requests that we've been getting is that you're ready to learn and that you want to have a takeaway. What's the takeaway from our training? So I'm hoping that today and the tips that we have to provide for you satisfy that. And again, if they don't, please fill out the survey and let me know what we can do to improve. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. Mallory Martin is someone that I met about maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I started doing conduct and compliance. She's our colleague from U of M, and I'm going to read her bio. So Mallory is the Associate Director for Housing, Student Conduct, and Conflict Resolution for the University of Michigan. As such, she oversees all conduct in residential spaces and works to educate staff in student life on the values of restorative practices and the intersection with diversity and inclusion. Mallory attended University of Colorado, where she received her bachelor's in international studies and later received her master's degree in educational leadership and policy studies from the University of Washington in 2010, and recently received her graduate certificate in restorative practices from the International Institute of Restorative Practices. Mallory is also the founder and co-coordinator for the National Working Group on Exploring Restorative Responses to Bias Incidents on Campus and Midwest Region, chair for the Association of Student Conduct Administrators. Mallory and I have an inside joke that she looks just like my cousin, my literal cousin in Mexico City. And the first time I saw her, I creeped her out a little bit because I kept staring at her. So I have to confess that I'm honored that she's here in spite of my most recent stalking. So Mallory and I work together through our association. At one point, we were co-state coordinators for the Association Student Conduct Administrators, and that's where we really developed this collaborative spirit. And her area of expertise is in restorative justice practices, and it is the tool that we want to share with you today as a way to address safety and conflict so that that skill you take with you, not just necessarily here when we're helping students or when we're collaborating with our peers, but also so that we can use it as a tool externally. So you'll notice that the title on my screen says Bold Ideas Begin Here, and I think it really is because that's the purpose that we've been honing in with this summit. Dr. Herbst really wanted to put the onus of learning on all of us and for you to provide your ideas and for us to run with it. So with that said, our commitment with the behavioral intervention team, with the care team, campus safety, and student affairs is to create a learning environment for everyone, where everyone learns. And everyone includes all of us as faculty and staff. We strive to coach you through unforeseen situations, ensure policies, procedures, and the expected guidelines. So our goal with that is to share with you what are the types of reports that we have. And in talking with Mallory, whether you're U of M, whether you're HFC, or another institution, types of reports don't necessarily vary by campus. What sometimes varies by campus due to our structures is where you're reporting. So the behavior threat that we gauge on campus with the counseling staff and the behavioral intervention team is what type of disruption is taking place, and in cases there are things that are more geared towards a student's mental health, anxiety, and stress. So the cheat sheet that I have behind me is available for you in the portal, and it's there for you to print out in addition to who you can contact, as you can see, when you have questions. So the team members for the behavioral intervention team, as you can see, is a cross-functional team. Dr. Herbst, Dr. Glass, Amy Clark is our legal counsel, myself, Dr. Atala, and Karen Schoen. The Counseling, Assessment, Response, and Education team, which is more for supporting students who are displaying disturbing behavior, mental health situations, stress, anxiety, etc., are Dr. Hildreth, Dr. Webster, and Dr. Atala. Ideally, when situations happen, what happens is, and I say ideally because there are times where these three intertwine, but if I have to give you the genres of what we look for, are academic situations that happen in the classroom that sometimes are supposed to be handled through the student complaint policy and procedure, which is the policy that serves as a tool for students to express their discontent with us. And I say us because as a colleague, someone can be not happy with my service, and then in that case, they have the right to complain about my service through the student complaint policy and procedure. And then, of course, the student code of conduct. And Title IX situations, which of course are handled through myself for the student part, and Lynn Borson in HR if it's an employee that's involved. The ways that we receive reports are also important for us to take note because they vary for a reason. A lot of the times, our students want to report behavior, but they want to do it anonymously. Anonymously does not mean the same thing as confidentiality. Anonymous reporting can be done through our online web form, which the website is right there for you, the hfcc.edu incident report. That's the anonymous tool. Confidential tools are provided regardless of where you report because by FERPA guidelines and of course professional and ethics guidelines, we only share information about reports with the people who have an educational right to know. So that's the confidential aspect of it. And for that type of report, you can go to Campus Safety, you can do the web form, you can send an email to myself, to a BIT member, to your supervisor, okay? And then one last note regarding that is that the only avenue that's available 24/7 is that web form or Campus Safety. Campus Safety submits the reports to my office, so if you ever wonder, well, if I submit it to Campus Safety, will it be routed? The answer is yes. With that said, I wanted to start our real program. Somebody gave me a tip yesterday. They said, if you want people to really pay attention to your presentation, you have to tell them the truth. The truth is that you're going to bore them to death. And I said, okay, then I will. So I became a fan of the NYET approach because our student profile at Henry Ford College, according to institutional research data, is that over 40% of our students placed into remedial reading and writing. That's a significant amount of students, which means that they are learning and they are growing. Sometimes there's a disconnect in the way that we are communicating in terms of my policy, specifically in my department. I'm explaining policy, procedure, cause, and consequence. And I also have to keep on my mind that the person I'm speaking to, I don't know if I'm communicating with them in a way where they're understanding me. And so I like this approach because this approach applies also to me. And although it comes from the K through 12 system, Mallory and I wanted you to see the video I'm going to show you and consider this approach to today's lesson, and certainly remember this approach when you're helping our students. And if somebody can help me with the lights, even if it's one set, because I think this is going to be white on white. So,
customers. Cognitive can help.
In my work, we find that some students have a fixed mindset about their intellectual abilities and talents. They think intelligence is just a fixed trait. You have a certain amount, and that's about their intellectual.
thank you.
In my work, we find that some students have a fixed mindset about their intellectual abilities and talents. They think intelligence is just a fixed trait. You have a certain amount, and that's that. This is the mindset that makes kids afraid to try because they're afraid to look dumb. But other students have a growth mindset. They believe that intelligence can be developed through their effort, dedication, learning, and mentorship from others. They don't think everyone's the same or that anyone can be Einstein, but they understand that even Einstein wasn't the guy he became before he put in years and years of dedicated labor. I'm going to organize this by telling you about a study we did with hundreds of students making the transition to 7th grade. They're about 13 years old. It's an extremely difficult transition. The work gets substantially harder, the grading gets more stringent, the environment becomes less personal. And that's a crucial time. It's a time when many students turn off to school. So as they entered, we measured their mindsets. That is, we saw whether they believed intelligence was fixed or could be developed. We monitored their grades in math over the next 2 years. We also measured a lot about their attitudes toward learning. They had entered 7th grade with just about identical achievement test scores, but by the end of the first term, their grades jumped apart and continued to diverge over the next 2 years. The only thing that differed were their mindsets. Now, let's see why and how this happened. The first thing we found was that they had completely different goals in school. The number one goal for kids in a fixed mindset is look smart at all times and at all costs. So their whole lives are oriented toward avoiding tasks that might show a deficiency. But in a growth mindset, where they believe intelligence can be developed, their cardinal rule is learn at all times and at all costs. That brings us to the second mindset rule. In a fixed mindset, effort is a bad thing. They believe if you have ability, you shouldn't need effort. And if you need a lot of effort, it's a sign that you don't have ability. I believe that belief, that if you have ability, you shouldn't need effort, is one of the worst beliefs that anyone can have. I think it's why so many of our promising students don't fulfill their potential. They go along, coasting along, not trying that hard. The other kids have to try. One day they have to try too, and they can't do it. Whereas students in a growth mindset say effort is what activates their ability. And rule number 3, in a fixed mindset, a setback or deficiency measures you and reveals your limitations. So what we find is that those students in a fixed mindset try to hide their mistakes or run from their mistakes, conceal their deficiencies. But those in a growth mindset think mistakes, setbacks, natural part of learning. It's what happens when you take on challenges. So a fixed mindset gives no way for students to handle difficulty. They may get discouraged, give up, flee, or become defensive, acting bored. Often this statement, it's boring, it's a cover for a fixed mindset. It means I'm afraid to try, or acting out, blaming the teacher or material. How are these mindsets transmitted? We've studied this in a number of ways, but maybe the most interesting way is through praise. For 15 years, we have studied how adults' praise affects students. We undertook this work at the height of the self-esteem movement, when the gurus were telling us all to praise our children's ability, tell them how brilliant and talented they are. But for 15 years, we have found praising children's intelligence harms them. It puts them into a fixed mindset and turns them off to challenging learning. Let me tell you about a series of studies we did with 10 and 11-year-olds. We brought them to a room in their school. We gave them 10 problems from this nonverbal IQ test initially. They did pretty well because they were matched to their age level, and each child received one form of praise. A third of them got intelligence praise. Wow, that's a really good score. You must be smart at this. Or process praise. That's about the process they engaged in. Could be their strategy, their effort, their focus, their persistence. Wow, that's a really good score. You must have tried really hard. And the control group. Wow, that's a really good score. I won't talk much about them because they tended to be in the middle. Now, if you listen carefully to the messages that are embodied in each statement, the first one says, I value intelligence. The second says, I value process. Let's see what happened. First, yes indeed, praising intelligence put kids into a fixed mindset compared to praising the process. But the most astonishing thing to us was that praising intelligence turned kids off to learning. Because after we praised them, we said, what do you want to do now? Anything's fine with us. You want a hard task you can learn from, but you might make mistakes? Or do you want a task that's like something you're already good at? The majority of kids who were praised for their intelligence rejected the chance to learn in favor of something they were sure to do well on. But those praised for the process overwhelmingly wanted the hard task they could learn from. They didn't feel they were in jeopardy if they struggled for a while. Later, we gave everyone a difficult set of problems. And here we found that those who were praised for intelligence lost their confidence, didn't enjoy the problems anymore. And even when we went back to the easier problems, their performance suffered. Those who were praised for the process remained confident. They saw these problems were harder. Many of them said the hard ones were their favorites. And when we went back to the easier ones, their performance flourished because they remained engaged and they remained learning. A few months ago, we published a study showing that mothers' praise to their babies 1 to 3 years of age predicted that child's mindset and desire for challenge 5 years later. So now I feel justified when I intervene with mothers at airports who are telling their babies that they're geniuses. I have the data. So remember, praise process. But it's even more than that. It's convey to children a new value system. Not about quick, easy, smart things, but like this. Sit around the dinner table and say, who had a fabulous struggle today? And each person shares the struggle. Or if a child does something quickly and easily, instead of rushing to tell them how good they are at it, we should say, oh, I'm sorry I wasted your time. Let's do something hard. Let's do something you can learn from. Recently, I have fallen in love with a new word, yet. I heard of a high school in Chicago where when they didn't master a unit, instead of a failing grade, they got the grade not yet. And I thought, isn't that great? Because not yet means, hey, you're on that learning curve, you're somewhere. And so if a child says, I'm not good at maths yet, it's like, get back on that learning curve. I can't do it yet. I tried, but it didn't work yet. The more research shows us that human abilities are capable of growth, the more it becomes a basic human right for students to experience that growth, to live in environments in which all students can fulfill their potential.
Okay, can folks hear me? Awesome. What we'd like for you to do, just as we transition to the next slide, is to think about, so for yourself, maybe this is the first time you've heard some of this information, or you're thinking about your own childhood or your parenting strategies. So for you, in a conversation at your table, what would be something that you would have changed or done differently if someone had told you, or perhaps you had told someone, not yet? And as deep or as surface as you want to go into this is your call. So at your table, what would it have been like if you had told someone or someone had told to you, not yet? How that had made you feel, what might have the circumstances been, and I'll bring you back together in about a minute. All right, let's bring things back together. I hate to interrupt because it looks like folks are engaged and talking. It's always nice to talk about yourself, right? Especially with your colleagues. So I just posed that question because I think it's interesting because it brings up a couple different things as was kind of shared in the video, is that we bring kind of ourselves and our story with us in all capacities in our life, in our work, and so do the students or prospective students that are coming and working and interacting with you. And all of kind of that story, that history, socialization, et cetera, is present for both parties that are engaged in a conversation. And so when we think about what might be happening for this person, how might they be presenting, what's happening for me, how might I be presenting, part of that is very deep and ingrained in kind of who we are as people, and again, kind of socialization and just the world in which we engage. And so to ask that question, like, what would have changed for you if someone had said, not yet? What would have changed if you now think about saying to someone, not yet, we're getting there, but not yet? I think about being a parent of two small little people and how my praise to them, because I'm in that in-between 0 to 5 year magic time apparently, really is important to be cognizant of and to think about. So how am I being mindful of the conversations I want to have with them? So it's just a great primer, I think, to engage in the conversations for today. And something that I just want to share, not necessarily related to this quote, is that we all address things differently, and we all, again, bring with us different skill sets into the work that we do, as do our students. Conflict resolution skills and dialogue skills are learnable skills. There may be some of those skills that are like, not yet. We're not yet there. It takes some time. It takes getting into the groove a little bit. It takes a situation in which we kind of are vulnerable and put ourselves in the midst of, and it's an ongoing process. And it's okay to be okay with conflict. A lot of the work that I do is related to conflict resolution. And so knowing that conflict exists, in my work, I really tell people that if there were to be no incidents, no behavior on campus, or no conflict in our communities, I'm actually not doing a great job, because we want to talk, we want to engage, we want to dialogue, and then when things kind of go awry or there's impact or harm, we want to be able to know what to do and how to kind of re-engage with one another. And so normalizing conflict, normalizing that we want to have conversations and recognize all that kind of comes with us in those conversations is a really great first step in addressing the topic of the day. And that's what we're going to kind of delve into a little bit further, is specific skill sets that might be just a helpful kind of repertoire to have on the journey of conflict resolution skills and addressing safety in a multitude of ways. So the topic of the day, what we'd like for you to think about now, just at your table groups again, is, so what for you does safety look like? And that can mean any number of things. Again, you take this where you want to take it, but talk amongst your group. So when you hear safety, what kind of comes up for you? What does that look like? And then I'll bring folks together and we'll have some lovely volunteers kind of get feedback from the group, and we'll write it on some of the post-it paper up here. Okay?